Hi, everybody. This is Mormonism Live. I almost said Mormonism After Dark, but no, it's not. It's Mormonism Live because today is Wednesday. Welcome, everybody. Glad to have you joining us on the show. Hello, Mr. Reel. Wonderful to see you as always. I didn't see you last Monday. I missed you horribly when I wasn't on the newscast, but I hear you soldiered through with Rebecca.
We did it. We knocked it out in an hour and 15 minutes, had a great newscast, but we did miss you and hope you're feeling better.
I am feeling better. Not perfect, but better. Okay. And we've got such a great show. We have a doctor on the show, a man of letters on the show. Those letters are OD. And as I have learned recently from the same individual, that means he's a doctor of ophthalmology, not an optometrist, but an ophthalmologist, which means, as I understand it, he can operate, he can do surgery, and he can also write prescriptions, which is why I want to make him such a good friend. It's always nice to have friends who can write prescriptions. Bringing on the stage now, Dr. Kim Clark. How are you? Well, we'll compromise there. So it's so great to have you on the show.
But before we get into those details, and this is important, I was looking more closely at this 47-page legal document that you had me sign upon the 5 points of foolishness. RFM, I need to go over some of the details with you.
Well, you've already signed it, so it's a little late for that.
Well, no, but please, I mean, for the record, in looking at the fine print, I promised that there would be no light-mindedness, no loud laughter. Oh, I love this one. No snickering. And I quote you, no evil speaking of the preening princes of pissology.
Is that me and Bill?
Are you kidding me? If you expect me to live up to the terms of this contract, this podcast should last all of about maybe 5 minutes. And that's assuming that whoever gives the benediction has a lot to be thankful for.
Well, I will let you explain all of that to the judge.
Well, and by the way, while we're on the subject of your guest is an idiot, I recall an anecdote from my youth. I was somewhere around the age of a deacon.
Yeah, was the expression rock good?
I don't think that was part of the discussion. Anyways, my parents.
That was big a long time ago. Rock good.
My parents took the occasion to remind me, or to inform me rather, that in the pre-existence, Lucifer was our elder brother. To which I said, well, now you tell me. I mean, that explains a few things. In other words, Mom and Dad, I think I came by it honestly.
Yes. Well, I make fun of how old you are. Actually, I think I'm older than you because for me, Satan is my little brother. I'm so old, Jesus is my little brother.
Well, anyways, all of these repressed memories from Kolob, of course, came rushing to the fore. And I remember one occasion when Lucy and I called him Lucy. He and I were best buds. Lucy and I were out behind the temple in the bushes, as I recall, drinking beer and smoking hippie lettuce.
Is it okay for families to hear this story?
Oh, of course. It's a true
Lucy
story.
In the bushes with beer?
Lucy in the bushes drinking beer and smoking hippie lettuce. And out of nowhere, number 137, or it could have been Heavenly Mother number 147. I could never tell them apart. Anyways, Heavenly Mumsy shows up, looks at me and says,
just call them all Mom.
They like that.
She looked at me and said, Kim, you little gobshite, what the feck are you doing? She must have been Irish. So next thing I know, I just blurted it out. Sorry, Mom, but Lucifer made me do it. Well, the next thing I know, poor Lucy gets sent to outer darkness without a flashlight, of course. And I'm assigned to a Mormon family in Calgary, Canada. I mean, at least I was born in the summer when it was warm.
So that's where you were born, was in Canada.
Correct.
You're a knucklehead.
I used to be. I'm now a dual citizen, actually.
With the United States?
Correct.
And can you tell us the state that you live in now? Or does that violate the rules of the witness protection program?
I think you just froze.
I think you froze.
No, I'm okay.
You froze earlier.
I don't know.
The only time I find out is when I watch it later. So anyway, so you were born in Canada.
Correct.
Some time ago when expressions were big about rocks. And then you grew up, you were born in the covenant. You grew up as a good Mormon should. You got baptized. You got the priesthood. You went on a mission.
Correct.
Was it 2 years when you went on a mission, Kim, or was it longer?
Yes. Yeah. September of 73 through 75.
So 2 years?
Yeah.
Okay. Where'd you go?
The Netherlands Amsterdam mission, which
You have a good time?
included, I'm sorry,
Have a good time?
as good as one can have as a missionary. It was actually overall a great experience. In fact, one of the greatest ironies of my life is that it took Mormonism for me to meet the most incredible person I've ever known, in my wife, Cindy Russell Clark, my late wife, Cindy.
And you met Cindy on your mission?
By way of a missionary companion who identified in me a sense of humor that he thought would resonate with someone he knew in madrigals.
What's madrigals? I mean,
High
it's
school
like
choir. Yeah, high
Okay.
school choir.
So she was not on the mission. It's just your mission
Oh, no.
companion knew her and thought you guys would be a great match.
Yeah, and he
was
turned
right.
out he was right. Yeah.
Wow. Well, I'm sorry that she's your late wife. Obviously, you love her very much.
Deeply.
It's right after that slide that you had supplied to us in younger years.
Yes, that's my darling wife, Cindy, and my dog, Bonnie Biggles.
And Bonnie, where's Bonnie?
Somewhere in the house sniffing, waiting for Dad to join her on the couch.
I thought she was still.
It's normally at this time that she's expecting a belly rub. So I'm hopeful that she'll forgive me.
Okay. Well, she really needs one. You can bring her up here. The whole audience would love to see Bonnie.
Again, without going into details, we built our retirement home on the Oregon coast in the city of Newport. But we never intended to live there until I retired. And I had a perfect opportunity to establish a practice in Portland in 2009, which is when we sold my practice in Sandy, Utah, to one of my optometric colleagues and relocated to Portland. And I retired in 2021.
Okay, so all that happens in 2009. That's when he gets called to be in the First Quorum of the 70. Of course, he'd been doing other important Mormon stuff before that. Then he gets called in the First Quorum of the 70 for 6 years. 2015, he becomes an apostle. You find out about it, and something possessed you, something evil, I think, that you had an idea that you wanted to write Elder Renlund a letter.
Well, if you can call curiosity, maybe unbridled curiosity, evil, or that I was possessed, yeah. God would never answer my prayers. What I was hoping for as something resembling a Socratic colloquy, more often than not turned out to be a soliloquy. No one but the ceiling fan was listening to my prayers. So I had basically given up on God as a reliable source of information. Learned that, yes.
I want to give you a chance just to make sure I understand this. Why were you crying out to God in the first place?
Probably for the same reason that the two of you employed that same method of communication when you were still believing members.
And I'm so sorry, because I don't mean why were you using prayer? What were you praying for is what I'm trying to ask.
Some understanding. I mean, where I had become aware of doubts or conflicts in what I was being asked to believe with what I was discovering. They were at variance. I was unable to reconcile these conflicts. It created a state for me of what I call intellectual dysrhythmia, would be akin to cognitive dissonance. And it was, my nature is, for me to accept anything, I have to understand it. And unless I understand it, do not rely upon my cooperation. And it's not that I'm trying to be obstreperous or contumacious, difficult. No, I want to support what you're asking me to support, but only if I understand what it is you're asking me to accept and what are your intended objectives. And unless and not until I understand that, you can expect some either pushback, especially if I discover reasons why I think you're barking up a tree, or I may ask additional questions because additional information is required. And I was getting nothing from God. And what I was getting from the scriptures was at variance with what I was hearing at church. In fact, one of the reasons, I was an elders quorum president, and I came to the awareness, or the belief at least, that the church is in apostasy. Well, that's not anything your bishop or stake president wants to hear when you're the elders quorum president. And so I requested a meeting with the stake president to express to him some of my concerns. And by then I was reasonably confident that the jig was up, that this is all bullshit. But I wanted to at least let him know what my concerns were. Well, long story short, when he was not receptive to some of my concern and my evidences from Isaiah, the Book of Mormon, the Davidic king, the noble and great ones, etc., when it was obvious he was not interested in hearing the particulars, he actually went so far as to threaten me then with excommunication. Well, I didn't help my case when I said to him, sir, with respect, excommunication from an apostate church is hardly the stroke of death. Well, that did nothing to assuage his contempt for this little recusant gobshite. So anyways, without hesitation, that was, I believe, on a Tuesday. Saturday, I went over to his home, found him working in the garage, and wanted to explain to him that maybe we could work things out, only to discover I had already been released and that someone else had been called to be the new elders quorum president.
A Rolling Stone, they say.
Unbelievable. Yeah. So anyways, that led to an eventual decision to distance myself from the organizational church. It wasn't enough to simply go inactive. No. I no longer wanted to be affiliated with an organization that paid victorious disregard to evidence and the facts, even from their own records, from their own scriptures.
I hear you. So that's 1991, right?
Well, that's when I formally left. Yes.
So we've got 24 years later, you're writing this letter.
So a long time. Yeah. When I find out that Renlund is now an apostle, God won't answer my prayers. So I'll do the next best thing. I'll take it and I will write him a letter because, again, I think there's a non-zero probability that the LDS Church is true. But it's very, very unlikely that Elder Renlund would be able to provide me any evidence to save the organizational church. But hey, I could be wrong. And I'm willing to proportion my beliefs accordingly. I so enjoyed our substantive discussions conducted during office visits. Your warm and unassuming nature has registered an indelible impress. As I recall, your wife is an attorney, and your daughter was completing her law school studies at Harvard University.
Can I stop you for a second, Doc?
Of course.
Did it ever strike you as weird that these Mormon women are doing so much when the rest of the Mormon women are told to stay at home and get married and have babies as fast as possible?
Practice what you preach?
Did that ever occur to you or cross your mind?
I don't think I ever saw myself brave enough to fully address the question. I was not expecting a bountiful harvest, shall we say.
Sure, I know. And you don't want to offend anybody.
No. So forgive
but
me.
Definitely we have certain rules that we follow, and we will promote the women who do not follow what we say women should do. We'll promote them to positions of authority in the church.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'll let you take that one up with him.
I will. I think I just did, because I hope Elder Renlund's going to be watching this one.
Oh,
So Elder
I'm
Renlund, hello, sir. How are things in Sweden? How's the rescue going? And I hope that you're doing well, because actually you come across, I think, looking very good in this episode, because Dr. Clark thinks that you're a good guy. He told you when asked that he's an atheist, he used to be a Mormon, and yet that did not affect how you treated him. And you would listen to him and talk with him about these issues in a friendly and apparently open way. And I think that's all to the good.
So the father and romantic in me can only hope that your daughter was able to join her mother's law firm. But reality does not always follow the script that fertile imaginations are wont to compose. Will your recent calling require that your wife take an indefinite leave of absence?
Certainly a leave of her senses.
I do not know that LDS security will allow letters from unknown parties to find their way to their intended destination, especially letters addressed to the members of the Quorum of the 12. I can only imagine that there is no small number of crackpots looking for the opportunity to parade their intellectual poverty, or persons burdened with mental health pathologies threatening or determined to enact violence. I'm hopeful, however, that this letter does in fact find its way to your desk. Confirmation would be appreciated.
And would not be forthcoming.
Exactly. I'm still
not
waiting.
Even confirmation, not even thanks for the letter, pal.
Offering congratulations seems inappropriate to me, if for no other reason than the belief that under no condition would you ever petition for or seek such attention or recognition. I suspect that so long as you are found in the service of others, that is all the reward you require. I'm confident that you will discharge your duties and ecclesiastical responsibilities with aplomb, and that church members will benefit from your broad and diverse experience and congenial nature.
Did Elder Renlund ever talk to you about the Carol Burnett show? Because I think he was a fan.
Not that I recall.
I think he was a big Carol Burnett fan.
Okay.
Just saying.
Okay, just saying.
Yeah.
You know,
oh, RFM, I'm sorry, what?
I was going to say that some of your thoughts, RFM, are better pondered than expressed. But I'm sure others have told you that.
You know, I deserve medals for the things I don't say. People think that I say everything that comes to mind. I want to assure you that if I did, you would be even more scandalized than you already are.
Well, I would never have agreed.
Doesn't his wife look like Carol Burnett? I'm so glad we had this time together.
Not the Carol Burnett I know.
Yeah, that's that Carol.
Anyways, okay.
Right.
So
compartmentalization.
Yes. While the details of past discussions are largely forgotten to me, on at least one occasion you remarked that reconciling one's religious beliefs with knowledge secured through the scientific method of investigation not infrequently required some degree of compartmentalization, that trust and faith was often necessary to accept what was otherwise not obvious or confuted by the evidence. While I'm sympathetic to the cognitive dissonance such conflict evokes, when it comes to identifying truth, faith has no place in the discussion. At no time should any amount of faith be required to recognize and accept what is true. Something is true because evidence in the form of data, independent testing, and observation proved it to be true, and for no other reason. Likewise, gut feelings, common sense, and raw emotion are unreliable guides when it comes to discovering and knowing what is true. Feelings are not empirical facts. One example will suffice. If you want to go to the next, there we go. One example will suffice.
I want to hear about your example. I'm sorry. It just occurred to me. Had you heard in the news? I'm hearing rumors that may have some degree of justification. It has to do with President Nelson's eyes, which is why I bring it up to you. And I understand that they have failed. Have you heard of that?
I have, and I saw some remark to that effect by Rebecca Biblioteca.
Yeah.
When someone is that old, the most likely, and let me be clear, I have never examined the eyes of Dr. Nelson, President Nelson.
That's the problem. Otherwise, you wouldn't be having trouble.
True story, though, and I won't go into these details. Years ago, I was actually the doctor on call to go in and see a patient on an emergency, and that patient happened to be his first wife, who I know has passed away.
Danzel.
Whatever her name was, I don't remember.
Yeah, Danzel Nelson.
Okay, I was the doctor that saw her for an emergency follow-up visit. A delightful, sweet lady. And at the end of the exam, she was brought into the clinic by her daughter. And her daughter said, my father is also a physician. He would very much appreciate you calling him to explain what's going on with his wife, which I did. But that's the closest I came to ever meeting President Nelson. Anyways, so without having ever, I talked to him on the phone about the post-operative status with his wife. She had a procedure earlier that day and was having some complications. And so I had to go in and see her and got things going in the right direction. But anyways, what I was going to say, the most probable problem he's having is something known as geographic age-related macular degeneration. When someone is that old, their retina will inexorably atrophy in a circumscribed area. So if in fact that is the case, and please, I can't underscore this enough, I do not know that it is. I am not privy to such information, but that would be the most likely explanation.
Does that mean his retina is shriveling up, this atrophy that you're talking about?
Well, it's called the retinal pigment epithelium of the central retina, an area known as the macula. The macula is responsible for your central vision, and it's a critically important part of the retina. The analogy I used to give my patients to help them understand the importance of the macula is, I would say, think of it as what Salt Lake City is to the state of Utah. Mm-hmm. Salt Lake City is a very small part of the state, but it's a critically important part of the state. As
is the part with all the cones on it?
Yes, that's where the cones are most densely populated. So anyways, so these patients will develop central vision impairment. And in fact, when they look at you, if they were to look at you directly, they wouldn't see you. There would be a blank screen there. It's called a scotoma. So to see you, they actually have to look at you this way. And that way they can see you with their peripheral retina. Mm-hmm. But it's the central retina that is key when it comes to reading small print and fine details, which is why patients with AMD, age-related macular degeneration, which is why they will have to surrender their driver's licenses, because you have to meet a certain threshold. Well, if you don't have central vision, sorry, Mrs. Jones, but we have to take away driving privileges. Anyways.
Yeah, I can't imagine trying to read anything in my peripheral vision.
No,
I don't know how I could do that, really.
You would have to
colors over here.
You would have to avail yourself to low vision services, it's called, where you have to have things magnified to an extreme degree. No. Do not wish macular degeneration on even your worst enemies. But at least they have their peripheral vision, even though they've lost their central vision.
Okay. Well, I'm sure we'll all be praying for President Nelson.
Anyways, okay. So where were we in the slideshow?
Let's see. Oh, it was at the CERN.
I think we're at the
slider.
LHC. Yes.
And I'm gonna have to interrupt you like 10 times to explain what the hell you're talking about here. But go ahead.
Okay, it's actually quite simple. So one example will suffice. Can you imagine the chilled reception physicists would have given project leader Fabiola Giannotti at CERN's Large Hadron Collider had she announced that the Higgs boson was to be accepted on the word of Peter Higgs et al., or even worse, on a hunch or on faith?
So if I were to collapse this entire rather lengthy sentence, basically what you're saying is that if some scientist said, you have to believe in the scientific thing that I discovered, which is crazy and unexpected, just on my word alone, that would be ridiculous.
Exactly.
In the scientific world.
And even if you came up with elegant mathematics to defend your proposal, and this is the case with string theory, for example, or another one called loop quantum gravity. They've got some elegant math. What's lacking is observational evidence or a falsifiable theory. So until you can come up with a falsifiable theory, no, then it's not science. It's just is
this the place that almost made the Earth into a black hole a few years ago?
That was one of the concerns, which was ridiculous, but that's another subject. But the point I wanted to make here is that the scientific method, as in the case of the discovery of the Higgs boson, is that it was verified, or it satisfied what's called the 5 sigma threshold, which is simply that there's one chance in 3.5 million that you're wrong. That's the 5 sigma threshold. That's how they know that they found the Higgs boson, or at least evidence for it. And that's a different story. I won't get into that one.
Well, that's a pretty sure thing. I usually don't do anything until I'm at least 5 sigma levels of certainty. I wish I had 5 sigma levels of certainty on my first and second marriages.
You were just too impatient.
I think I was flipping a coin or something.
Anyways, okay. So the bottom line of that one maybe is the important one. And that is, as the empiricist David Hume implored, we're wise to proportion our beliefs to the evidence. Okay, let's go to the next slide.
You know, Dr. Clark, something that I've done for a long time, I don't know that I've always done it, but you know, if people are telling me stuff all the time, or I'm reading stuff and there are claims, all these claims and different things, and if there's not solid evidence to support a claim, I just put it over here. What I'm doing is I'm motioning over here to my left, inside my head. I just put it up there on a shelf, you know, if I even care about it. Otherwise, it's gone. I don't care about it. But if it's something that's interesting, I will see if there's evidence. And if not, then I'm not going to put it on the shelf that's over here on the right, which are things that I think are correct.
Yeah. But even if you do put it on the shelf that's to your right, meaning that you've accepted it, naturally, you're going to provide it only provisional acceptance.
Yes.
You're going to be open to the fact that you could be wrong, which is precisely what motivated me to write my letter to Elder Renlund. I'm open to the fact that I could be wrong. But if you think about it, isn't it wonderful to discover when you're wrong? Because by discovering that you're wrong, you're that much closer to understanding what is true. So I welcome the opportunity to learn that I got it wrong. Why would I want to hold to that which is provably false? Yeah.
Yeah, we'll see
Okay.
if Elder Renlund shares your position on that, your philosophy.
It wouldn't
Um,
surprise me if he did, if he does, which is exactly the reason why he would not respond.
right.
So let's go to the next one.
Okay.
As a child, I was reminded that it was okay to question, but never was I to doubt that what my parents and priesthood leaders taught me was true. It was not until I returned from my LDS mission, got married in the temple, and was living outside my parents' range of influence that I was at last free to more fully examine the religion of my youth. As I scrutinized the oft-repeated apothegm, God would never allow his prophet to lead us astray, I discovered instead an abundance of evidence to the contrary. In short, I'm willing to suffer gladly the questions I cannot answer than answers I cannot question.
Yeah, that's a good saying, isn't it?
Yeah, boy, I mean, that cuts right to the heart of it, doesn't it?
Yeah. Mormons are big on answers that you can't question. They got a lot of those.
Well, that's why faith is a putative virtue and not the poison that I see it to be.
Okay.
Before identifying some of the more troubling issues surrounding church history and doctrine, however, I need to be unmistakably clear. My intentions are not protreptic.
What
I
does
am not.
protreptic mean? Isn't that against the law of chastity?
To be protreptic is to engage someone with the intent of convincing them that you are right, to bringing them to your side of the argument.
Okay.
Okay, so you're looking to convert them to your point of view. I am not intending to engage you in a spirited or resentful debate, nor am I looking to disabuse you of your faith or convictions. I have too much respect for you to mount such a misguided and tawdry campaign. I'm decidedly not looking to challenge your intellect or aim to measure which of us is smarter or more knowledgeable. I come to you as someone whose opinion I value and whose judgment and reasoning skills I respect. In short, I sincerely want to know what is true and not what is merely hoped for. I am hopeful that you genuinely know something I have not yet discovered, and that you will not be parsimonious with such information.
So you're kind of like being Jeremy Reynolds here, except instead of a CES director, you're writing your letter to a LDS Apostle.
If I'm wrong and there is a God, I want to be able to defend my behaviors, to include why I chose to be an atheist, even though God is sitting on the bench right in front of me. I
You
think
want to say, hey, I asked, here's the letter. He didn't respond. It's not on me.
I would be more successful in defending my atheism than in ever trying to explain how it is I unearthed the material that I did, how it is I came to these informed conclusions, and yet in spite of all that I learned, I continued to believe. No, talk about intellectual poverty. No, that's inexcusable.
I think this one's on Jesus. My goodness, it continues.
If the
I'm
title,
so sorry. It's got quite the prologue.
if the title Prophet, Seer, and Revelator has any meaning and merit, if it is more than a colloquial expression or accolade, if such distinction truly describes and defines powers, privileges, and responsibilities the beneficiary is charged to bear and uphold, then I would argue you are eminently qualified to identify where my judgment and understanding of the facts may be in error. In other words, if anyone this side of the veil can neutralize or rebut my criticisms and animadversions, surely it would be a prophet, seer, and revelator.
Point of order.
Yeah.
What's an animadversion?
Animadversion is a very
Animadversion?
animadversion is a very spirited excoriation or attack. I tell you this because from direct experience, the efforts expended by church apologists and so-called scholars to address and explain away the many controversial subjects dogging the church since its days in Nauvoo have too often been disappointing and unprofitable ventures. As an aside, my criticism of apologists is that more often than not, they're inclined to defend what they claim to know is true, and they never stop to consider that it's not. What's on trial
Whether it is.
What's on trial is LDS dogma, history, and doctrinal claims, certainly not your reputation or fitness to serve as ombudsman for the Lord.
So do you know these guys down here, these particular apologists?
The one in the
Cardinellis there.
middle.
I love this one. This is actually a thumbnail they made. This is not a joke. They made this thumbnail. It says, "Stop listening to intellectuals." And Kwaku's pointing at a guy who looks like he's pretty smart in front of a board with a lot of equations on it. And they've got Jonah Barnes on there doing something, but they've got Cardinellis in the back. It looks like he's doing Earl Sinclair or maybe Curly Howard. What do you think of this thumbnail?
Well, you blanked out on me, so I only heard a fraction of what you said.
What do you think of this thumbnail? Do you think we should stop listening to intellectuals? Is that the path to wisdom?
Well, if you want to continue believing what you believe is true, even though the evidence confutes your beliefs, then that's possibly one option. Don't expect me to follow your lead, but yes, I would agree that is an option.
The thing that kills me about this is that they're serious. Not only are they dumb enough to actually believe this, they're dumb enough to say it in public.
Yeah, well, I think it stands on its own merits.
Well, here we go. Now, oh, hey, we're there. Go ahead, read that last couple lines there, that intro.
Okay, well, my criticisms are many. I'll limit myself to the following points of disagreement, sources, and references available upon request.
Okay, and the first one's Joseph Smith, his moral character. Hey, Bill, can you read that? Now we're gonna alternate you and me, Bill, on this.
Okay, well, Joseph Smith is moral character. As you know, the LDS Church has at last conceded that its founding prophet did in fact practice plural marriage, to include having brides as young as 14 years old, Helen Mar Kimball, Nancy Winchester, and 11 women who were already married, one of whom was 7 months pregnant. Not only were such marriages illegal, these marriages were performed without either the knowledge or consent of the living husbands, no known exceptions, or Joseph's wife, Emma. In fact, only 4 of Smith's 40-plus marriages were known to Emma. In light of such information, it seems reasonable to conclude that these conjugal arrangements were more Joseph's idea than God's directive. As an aside, as a physician, you'll appreciate the fact that menarche in the 1830s, and you're going to want to explain what menarche is.
Menarche is first menstruation.
Okay, so first menstruation. So the fact that menarche in the 1830s typically occurred somewhere between the 16th and 17th birthday, much later than it does today. By any reasonable standard, Joseph's 14-year-old brides were prepubescent girls, not young women suitable for marriage. Let's be clear. We are asked to believe that marrying girls 14 years of age and 11 women already married, by the way, not to mention the 15, 16, and 17-year-old girls, which are also plenty. And the 11 women already married was God's idea, and that by an obedient Joseph was only doing as he was told. Frankly, I find that hard to believe. By any reasonable standard, Smith's behaviors were more vile than praiseworthy. Yeah, amen.
You really focus in on the morality of the issue. Why is that so important to you, Dr. Clark?
Yeah, in the philosophy of science, there's something known as the inference to the best explanation. It's a form of abductive reasoning. The inference to the best explanation must harmonize with something known as the principle of simplicity, or the law of parsimony, which simply says, if there are multiple hypotheses competing for the same observation, to explain the same observation, whichever hypothesis comes with the fewest number of assumptions is more likely to be true than the proposal or hypothesis that has a larger number of assumptions. So in this area, or on the subject of plural marriage, there are really two propositions to consider. First, that this was in fact God's idea, and that Joseph was simply only doing what he was told. The other possibility is that Joseph had gone rogue, and that was acting off, or performing or behaving off script. So using the inference to the best explanation to guide us, let's look at the first proposition, that it was God's idea. Now, I'm sure all Mormons would agree that the God of Mormonism is the God of Abraham. And so we know from the relationship between the God of Abraham and Abraham that God has the right to test the fealty of his servant. In the case of Abraham, what greater test could he ask of Abraham other than to sacrifice his beloved Isaac? So he takes Isaac up the mountain, they build the stone altar, he's to sacrifice Isaac, and just as he's about to do so, God intervenes, and Isaac's life is spared. Well, if God can test Abraham, what prevents him from testing the fealty of Mr. Smith? So, as we know, God had made it very clear that adultery was a grievous sin. More serious, or the only other sins more serious, were murder and denial of the Holy Ghost, whatever that means. I've never figured that one out. But it's a grievous sin. Secondly, from the Wentworth letter and the Articles of Faith, we know that Mormons believe in obeying, honoring, and sustaining the law, and in being honest, true, faithful, etc., etc. So God could have then appeared to Joseph and said, forget everything that I've told you about morality, and instead I want you to establish the new and everlasting covenant of marriage. So Joseph grabs his little bouquet of flowers. Just as he's about to ring the doorbell to propose to the first bride, God intervenes and says, no, Joseph, do not ring the doorbell. I never intended for you to practice plural marriage. I was only testing your loyalty. If it was
an Abrahamic test, he would have stopped him at that point.
Precisely. Now, God knows that he never intended Joseph to establish the new and everlasting covenant. But Joseph didn't know that. So just as he's about to follow through, God intervenes to save Joseph the embarrassment. And then God says, look, go home, give your wife Emma a big hug and a kiss. Why don't you cook dinner tonight? And since it's a Monday, don't forget to have family home evening. Okay, so that's one option. Option two is Joseph could well have said no. Why? We need look no further than the Nuremberg trials. As we know from those leaders in Hitler's Third Reich that were charged with crimes against humanity, war crimes. I think there were 25 of them. 2 or 3 of them were acquitted for technicalities. The rest were found guilty, and 12 of them received the death sentence because of their behaviors. In other words, their defense, we were only doing what we were instructed to do by our leaders. No, it didn't hold up in a court of law. So Joseph could have said, God, what you're asking me to do is illegal. It's immoral. And frankly, I committed to Emma. She's committed to me. I can't do what you're asking me to do. But come on, I'm only a bipedal primate. I'm not God. If that's what you require, then I ask that I be released from this onerous burden and that you secure someone else to do your bidding. To which God could have said, No, Joseph, I made a right choice. I was only testing your fealty. You clearly are a man of principles. Go home to Emma and to only Emma, etc., etc. Okay. The other thing that, yeah, please.
The way this unfolded, it requires both God and Joseph Smith to be the unhealthiest of human beings.
Well, we'll get into that.
Yeah, I don't know why your examples always have God being against it. It seems like he was really rah-rah for polygamy.
Well, it's amazing what mythical figures can get away with. Because if you'll recall, I believe it was Brigham that taught the Adam God doctrine in the St. George Temple. I believe it was part of the preamble. Now, I'm not a church historian, so if I'm wrong, please correct me. I also believe that he learned the Adam God doctrine from none other than Joseph Smith. So if that's correct, then as we learned from one of the most basic axioms in mathematics or algebra is if A equals B, then B equals A. So if Adam is God, well, then God is Adam. So knowing that, Joseph could have simply said, by referring to the second article of faith, we believe that Joseph will be punished for Joseph's sins and not for God's transgressions. Okay? Joseph could have said, look, I have no control over what God's going to ask me to do, but I do have a say in what it is I agree to do. And God, you're asking me to do one too many things. I can't do it. In which case, I think God would have been impressed with his fealty and just how principled he really was.
You see, that's where you're getting it all wrong, Doc. God gets pissed and sends an angel with the flaming sword to threaten Joseph Smith's life is what happened.
Yeah, well, I think if there's a role to be played for a sword-wielding angel, it would have been when Joseph goes to approach this innocent 14-year-old child. As he goes to approach her, just before he rings that doorbell, that sword-wielding angel appears and says, Joseph, if you try to get to first base, you're going to lose your left testicle. Second base, there goes the right. And if you're stupid enough to go for a home run, say goodbye to old one eye. Now, that's an angel that I can support. That's a version that I can support. Otherwise, any such claim is just barking mad. I mean, give me a break. So if in fact I'm correct, if in fact Brigham and Joseph are correct that Adam is God and Adam is a mythical figure, I mean, come on, think about it. Do you actually expect to turn on the History Channel and see an episode of Adam and Eve joined by Fred and Wilma Flintstone playing a round of golf in the sleepy town of Bedrock? I mean, these are mythical figures. So I leave it to church apologists to explain how it is that a mythical being materialized in time to instruct Joseph to establish and then abide by the new and everlasting covenant of marriage. I mean, I just cannot connect those dots.
I feel like in future versions of the first vision, they should be painted as Fred and Barney. It's just an idea that came to me.
With any luck, and with any luck, they'll have remembered to bring their dog Dino along for the ride.
Absolutely. Okay, so let's go to the next one. Are we ready to go to the next one? There's a lot of these.
So just in conclusion, I think back to the inference to the best explanation. I think there's a vanishingly thin veneer of confidence that God sanctioned plural marriage, and that it's far more likely that it's a libidinous Joseph Smith acting upon his prurient interest.
And if God did sanction it, he's a dick.
Okay, we can go to the next.
Joseph Smith's first vision gets short shrift. That's why I picked this one for me and the other one for you, Bill. Why would Joseph, once again, in this letter written to Elder Renlund, which hopefully he read, and I'm sure he's still working after 10 years on his response, why would Joseph wait more than 12 years before telling even family members of his alleged 1820 theophany? And a related question, how do we reconcile the discrepancies found in the various rehearsals? In one version, for example, only angels appeared to Joseph. In another, it was Jesus. In the published version, it was both the Father and the Son. Why are no two versions the same? You think he could have gotten back to you on that one?
And let's not forget that in 1823, according to the Times and Seasons, he prayed to God, wanting to know if God even existed and where Joseph Smith stood in his relationship with God. I guess somehow Joseph forgot that he saw God in Jesus in 1820. Amazing.
Right. Well, it's been 3 years and things can change. You know, he's a teenager. He's got a lot of angst going on. The Book of Abraham. Hey, here's another big one for you, Bill.
I want to just note on the one previous, the apologist Stephen Harper is the expert in this issue.
Expert.
Yeah, he's the guy.
Yeah, he just says, memory changes. So Joseph Smith could have said he saw Mr. Stay Puffed in the freaking pillar of light, and it would be okay by Stephen Harper.
It's a strange thing because there comes a point where the event you experienced is so serious that, yeah, you might get the coat color wrong. You might forget, what the color of the eyes were. Your memory might change on things like that. But whether there was one being or two, and then of course the way the church and its experts deal with that issue of him the Lord opened the heavens and I saw the Lord. Again, it's a strange thing, and we're only on issue 2, but I'm just reminded, and everyone in the audience will make this connection as well, but I'm just reminded that on every issue, you pointed out, you have to take the conclusion that requires, and this is the way I say it, requires the least amount of conjecture and allowances. And what the church and its apologists require of you is that you, every single time on 1,000 issues, take the conclusion that requires more conjecture and more allowances. And somehow you're supposed to get to the end of that and feel like you're Jim Carrey in Dumb and Dumber when you go, oh, so you're saying there's a chance. And they promote it as if it's even better than that, right? 1 in a million.
Well,
it's more than 1 in a million.
The more nuancing you require, the less likely it is what you're asking me to believe has any standing in reality.
Yeah. Yeah.
It takes a smart person to fool somebody else. It takes a really smart person to fool yourself. So here's the Book of Abraham.
Yep. As it pertains to Joseph's understanding of each of the 3 facsimiles and the papyrus itself, none of the descriptions, interpretations, or translations pass muster. In my personal email communications with the renowned Egyptologist Dr. Robert Rittner of Chicago discussing the 3 facsimiles, he affirmed that in every particular, Joseph got the specifics wrong, very wrong. For virtually all respectable non-LDS Egyptologists, Smith's translation and interpretation is nothing short of a sham. Please recall that in 1826, a Bainbridge, New York court found Smith guilty of being a con artist. He later confessed to his father-in-law that he was a fraud, and he could not see buried treasure with his seer stone as he had previously claimed.
You know that sentence where you say for virtually all respectable non-LDS Egypt? I think you can take out virtually, and I think you can take out respectable. I think you can just say for all non-LDS Egyptologists, mistranslation and interpretation is nothing short of a sham.
Yeah. I don't disagree.
Are there exceptions?
I haven't
Does
met
anyone want
them.
to identify themselves out there in the audience if you're an Egyptologist that thinks that there's some merit to Joseph Smith's translation of the Egyptian?
It's certainly not Kara Cooney or Robert Rittner. That's for hell sure.
No, and tell us about you getting in contact with Robert Rittner.
Well, I in doing my research, came across, I think it was a book that he had published that I purchased and read and was impressed with it and wanted to share with him my understanding of what I understood him to say to find that my understanding was correct and that he had no respect whatsoever for his former student
John Gee.
and no respect for Professor Nibley's spin on these ancient documents. That really, I mean, I was very disappointed in Nibley because arguably Hugh Nibley is probably the smartest person I've ever met in person.
Yes.
I've met others, in their books and whatnot that are probably of equal intellect, but clearly if I can see the problems, he can see the problems.
He was busy using his intellect to fool himself completely.
And yet he full steam ahead. It defies understanding.
See, if you're smart like you, Nibley, you can come up with different ways that are incredibly unlikely, like to the point of it never happened, as an excuse to explain the evidence that's not supporting your position.
Yeah.
So you just start generating conspiracies, which is what he did with the scribes and how they all got together on rainy Sunday afternoons when Joseph Smith was off somewhere else and decided they were going to reverse engineer the book of Abraham into these strange little figures on the papyrus. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And here's the Book of Mormon translation, also in this letter. Why did Book of Mormon prophets go to great pains to preserve and protect their ancient record if the plates were never used in the translation process? Elder Renlund? As eyewitnesses affirmed, the translation of the sacred record came by way of a seer stone, the same stone with which Joseph was unable, by the way, to find buried treasures. And that seer stone placed inside Smith's hat, a hat held firmly to his face, and where the words were said to appear on the stone's glabrous surface. I looked that one up. It means like shiny, glistening, right?
Yes.
That's not translating. If anything, it's something akin to channeling, is how you conclude that section. You seem kind of exercised in this paragraph.
It's hard.
Maybe it was the way I read it.
No, yeah. I don't see an explanation.
But you're hoping that he'll give you one?
I mean, you can only imagine the disappointment of all of these Book of Mormon prophets, the efforts they went to preserve and create the record, only to have Smith use a seer stone instead.
Yeah, that must have been a bummer. Yeah. Especially for Moroni.
To say the least.
And I'll just say here, because we covered this a few episodes ago, but one of the stories that I and so many others got fed when this question was asked about why switching from the spectacles to the stone when the spectacles had been preserved, and why etch something that they said was so difficult to do, which was write on these plates. It was such a difficult thing for Smith to not use them, essentially. And at least with the spectacles, the response was, and they would point to various things, William Smith, Joseph Smith's brother, Charles Anton, that the spectacles hurt Joseph Smith's eyes, and so he went to the seer stone, and that was more comfortable. Only for us to find out that in the 1826 Bainbridge trial, Joseph Smith when on the stand testifying, said that the seer stone hurt his eyes just as well. So, anyway.
Well, it's not easy being a prophet.
It's not.
Okay, so here we go to resurrection. Now, this is not exclusively Mormon.
Yeah, now we're into the realm of Christianity. So resurrection, even though neither of us are physicists, we are applied scientists. We have both studied enough physics to know that entropy, the second law of thermodynamics, is an immutable and fundamental law of nature. An actual physical death and resurrection, revitalization of necrotic corpse, is a violation of natural law. A scrambled egg, for example, will never spontaneously unscramble. Moreover, Jesus' alleged same-day transatlantic trip to the Americas following his resurrection is an impossible feat. The principle of analogy affirms that if dead and buried bodies can resurrect in Jesus's day, they will be seen resurrecting in our day, but they aren't. And if not now, then why would any rational mind accept that they are resurrecting then? Such
Quixotic.
quixotic narratives simply cannot be mapped into reality. And I'll just say, I've said this a bunch of times too throughout the years. It is a strange thing that the miracles of the Old and New Testament that we are called on to believe with faith, that those are within the reasonable bounds of what God does, that as soon as history as it happened becomes a recordable thing, that we have the technology and the desire among the people of society to keep good records and witness to the things that have happened before us, suddenly those miracles vanish off the face of the earth. They no longer happen until a moment when Photoshop is invented and AI is created, and they suddenly become possible once again.
And we got UFOs all over the place too.
Yeah.
So did you want to say anything about this, Kim?
No.
Okay. The Book of Mormon and authorship attribution. You write, the evidence is mounting and overwhelming that the Book of Mormon was a collaborative effort and a campaign championed by Smith and his inner circle, an effort that drew from many resources to include a stolen manuscript. You don't still believe that, do you? Whatever it may be, the Book of Mormon is decidedly not ancient history. I can get behind that last sentence.
Well,
you don't still believe Solomon Spaulding, do you?
No, the reference to the stolen manuscript was in relation to a communication exchange I had with a guy named Craig Criddle. Are you familiar with him?
Didn't he do some word count stuff?
Yes.
Along with some guy named Jockers?
I don't know the others involved. There was at least two of them, if not three. I know I had communication with Criddle. He was a professor of engineering at Stanford University.
Is he a Mormon?
I'm sure, well, he's no longer a practicing Mormon. I don't know if he's formally removed his name from church records. I haven't had contact with him for 10 or more years.
But he was a Mormon at the time?
Yes, but a disbelieving Mormon. And he set up a website from memory, Mormon Leaks, I think it was. MormonLeaks.org.
That's a different one, I think. That's a different one.
MormonLeaks.org. But again, they put a lot of emphasis on this stolen manuscript that I believe it was Sidney Rigdon was working in a print shop.
In Pittsburgh, Jesus. Yeah. Sorry.
Okay. So anyways, no. So that was a reference to the work done by Craig Criddle. But I have not kept up with it.
Okay. Well, just as well. Because we kept up with it about as much as I want to last Friday night. Bill?
Hey, just FYI, just so that we are, because Ryan McKnight started Mormon Leaks, but you're right, by the way, Kim Clark. Dr. Clark, let me put this up on the screen really quick, just so that we get the facts right.
I just want to know if I'm right about Jockers.
Yeah, Jockers did one of the studies as well. So I'm gonna take this down for just a moment, add this up. The battle over Mormon Leaks, 2 websites, 1 name, and 1 goal target the LDS Church. Craig Criddle and Ryan McKnight have a lot in common. Both are former LDS missioners, blah, blah, blah. Both have a website called Mormon Leaks. So they were suing each other to see who owned the actual right to have a website called Mormon Leaks.
Wow.
And so Craig Criddle is the owner at one time of a site called Mormon Leaks, which would be different than the Ryan McKnight site of Mormon Leaks.
Because, of course, that's the one I was thinking of.
Yep. Anyway, so there's that.
Great. Good job. Thank you, Bill. Great memory, Dr. Clark. All right. So continuing on then in this letter written to Elder Renlund. Bill.
All right. We've got Adam and Eve. Adam and Eve, as you know, figure prominently in LDS scripture and doctrine. But as any respectable non-LDS biblical scholar knows, our primal parents are mythical archetypes. They are not historical persons. As evolutionary biologist Richard Dawkins explains, there were no first humans. Right. Like if you go back, like, this is me talking just so the audience knows, but you go back far enough and you keep backing up degrees of human, but where do you pick the moment where our ancient ancestors that would have been more primate in form, more monkey, chimpanzee, gorilla, something like that, and then at what moment does it meet a threshold and suddenly go like, there's the humans and there's Adam and Eve? Anyway.
Yeah, and I know that some people have tried to play that game, but it really doesn't answer the question, because really what we're looking for is the first two progenitors, not just sort of when you get across a sort of a made up line where someone says, okay, now you are human and now you're not human.
Yeah. Well, and let's not forget the inconvenient fact that I believe today it's commonly understood among anthropologists and paleoanthropologists that the first Homo sapiens arrived about 300,000 years ago.
They arrived? Aha, from where?
Yeah. So that Africa is the belief. There were a couple of locations, East Africa, and even in the Northwest, the area that is now known as Morocco. But again, these are all distant memories.
That's like the Uvalde Gorge or something.
In all Mormonism does, namely, I can think of Bruce R. McConkie, Mormonism then goes, okay, what we're saying doesn't match the science. So now we need a new workaround. We need more conjecture and more allowances. So we come up with the term pre-Adamites. So we have these people who are unconnected to Adam and Eve outside the garden doing their thing.
Oh, yeah.
And God then just took Adam and Eve, the first humans, placed them in this sacred space that was untouchable by the pre-Adamites. And Adam and Eve then lived in the Garden of Eden doing their thing. And people go like, oh, great, we got an answer to that problem. But all you did was just add in more layers of things needed to make something work. So anyway, I'll just say that. Okay.
I said Uvalde. I've done this before. It's Olduvai Gorge, which is in, Uvalde's in Texas. Olduvai, I think, is in Africa. Okay. So is that, that's a neat picture. Is that Gandalf out there in the background?
Is Gandalf. I'll finish here. As evolutionary biologist Richard Dawkins explains, there were no first humans. Therefore, the belief and doctrinal position that death came only after the fall of Adam is nonsensical. The claim simply doesn't hold water. With regards to the second article of faith, if you're not going to hold me accountable for someone else's sins, then how can you exalt me with someone else's glory? You can't have it both ways. I love that.
Yeah, tell us about that one, because I think that's exceptional. And I think you had mentioned to me in a prior phone call that struck you on your mission.
This hit me like a brick halfway through my mission. It dawned on me that I was taught that Jesus was our elder brother in the spirit world. And yet we learn from the temple endowment that he was an architect, if not the very contractor himself, that created the earth upon which he would later appear. But it dawned on me, just a minute, somehow my elder brother, my spirit elder brother, achieved apotheosis without having to take the final exam. Now, what I was taught is that you and I are down here in mortality, this probationary estate, intending, or charged rather, with proving our allegiance to God. And with favorable winds and our good fortune, we pass the test and achieve our own apotheosis, whereby we too may populate our own worlds without ends. But we have to come down here first.
I can explain that for you, Kim.
I'm all ears.
It's nepotism. Jesus gets to become God without going through mortality like we have to, in order, because, he's God's kid.
You must have been my missionary companion, because that was one alternative, was God is a nepotist, but I had a hard time with that one. So then it was, well, maybe this is one of those questions that we have to wait till the next life to have answered.
And of course, you're talking not about Jesus going through mortality on this planet, but his having achieved godhood apparently prior to the earth being created, thereby allowing him to be part of the creating team.
So that's when I made the discovery, the course of the Lord is one eternal round. I can't tell you how excited I was when I found that scripture in the Doctrine and Covenants, because then it made perfect sense. In other words, I'm thinking to myself here, Elder Clark, in other words, Jerusalem wasn't this cat's first rodeo. No, the course of the Lord is one eternal round.
I'm doing
But
that, which has
then-
been done on other worlds.
Yeah, you're finishing my sentences. Exactly. So then I'm
Well, we're
thinking,
an
well,
old married couple.
if he's, if we are to follow his example, Kim, connect the dots. The course of Kim Clark is one eternal round, which makes sense because what is Heavenly Father's plan called for, if not eternal progression?
Right.
So
And
then,
you started describing this to me on our first phone call, and I said, oh, yeah, MMPs. And you said, what? And I said, MMPs, multiple mortal probations. And you said, what? Because you hadn't heard of it referred to that way.
not in those terms, no.
You got to hang out with
So
like Lori Daybell and Chad Vallimore. I think I got those reversed, but what the hell?
Anyway, so then, yeah, I realized, okay, but that's reincarnation and that's false doctrine. But
Because
then I
Joseph
thought,
Smith said that reincarnation is a doctrine of the devil.
but then I thought it may be, but it makes sense. Because, I mean, think about it. There are children who are born who never live long enough to see 1 month on planet Earth, never mind their first birthday. And you look at all the unfairnesses, the cruelties going on right now in Gaza. I mean, hundreds of thousands of innocent children starving to death. And for what? That's their only experience in mortality? Are you fucking kidding me? I mean, that's ridiculous.
It's all bad.
Then,
I like psych ward radio is my argument that there is no God.
So then the course of the Lord is one eternal run. So yeah, you're one step ahead of me on the false doctrine. So I meet with my mission president, all excited about these brilliant discoveries, only to have him make short shrift of my arguments. And so I put it on the bookshelf, but then getting back to what's in the parentheses, you cannot exalt me with someone else's glory. Let me just conclude with this. Here's the analogy. It would be like my physics professors, them coming to me and saying, Kim, here's the deal. We all know you're a good student, but you're not going to be the valedictorian. You're smart, but you're not smart enough to become a theoretical physicist. But here's the deal. You're our favorite student. So if you promise to attend all your classes, if you complete all your physics labs, study hard for all of your examinations, Kim, we promise we will score you 100% on each one of your exams. To which I would say, hey, now just a minute. Yeah, I'm not stupid, but I'm not a brainiac. So I'm lucky if I get an 88 or a 90 on any of your exams. To which they say, well, don't worry about it. You're going to get 100. Okay, so I get to graduate valedictorian, knowing damn well there are others in the class who are a hell of a lot smarter than I am. And yet I've achieved my apotheosis. And if they say, oh no, this applies to all of the students, even the class clown, as long as he does the best he can, he's going to get 100% as well. No, here's what is fair. If my professors had said to me, we got some bad news and some good news. The bad news, if you want to consider yourself a theoretical physicist, you have to get 100% on your exam. Here's the good news. There is no time limit. Take all the time you need. And once you've achieved 100%, then Kim achieves his apotheosis. That I can live with.
Make Mormonism sound like an Eastern mystical religion.
That's a discussion for another time.
Okay. Well, we won't do it then now.
If Jesus compensates for what I lack, Okay, I'm the patient, but he's the one taking the medication. Figure that one out. But if I benefit from his largesse, I'm forever in his debt. No, I don't like that arrangement. I prefer the hard arrangement. Why? Because when I when I achieve that goal, that lofty goal, it's because of what I did and not what someone else did for me. Okay,
Well, if
that's all
Jesus
I
is
want.
the only thing keeping you from burning forever, he's kind of making you an offer you can't refuse.
Well, I don't consider that a legitimate proposal.
Okay, well,
I mean, I could be wrong. I could be wrong, and I'm happy to learn where my reasoning is a shot wide of the target.
you will have plenty of time to consider the error of your ways.
Okay, let's go to the next one.
Now, this one I want to read. Did you read the last one, Bill? You did, didn't you?
I think so.
I want to read this one because I think you've actually changed your mind on this one in the last 10 years since you wrote it to Elder Renlund, which I think is interesting because I'm going to guess that there are very few things doctrinal in nature that Elder Renlund has changed his mind on in the last 10 years. It could be wrong, but I don't think so. So here's what you wrote to him 10 years ago in this letter: immortal soul in the afterlife. As neuroscientists know, the autobiographical sense of self is an intractable illusion. The self, capital S, is a virtual agent causally derived by neurobiological mechanisms over which we have no control. You're talking about our bodies, right?
Yes, the brain, the mechanical operations.
Neurobiological. Okay, thank you. Substance dualism, from whence emerges the soul doctrine, i.e., there's a body and a soul, right? And the attendant Cartesian theater were long ago proven false. As the physician and neuroscientist
Giulio Tononi. Giulio Tononi.
Okay, noted. There is no soul, there is only the body, and the body is an old greasy machine. No brain, never mind. Okay, no brain, never mind. No mind, never self. And if no self, then no afterlife. And if no afterlife, then what becomes of the hope and promise of an eternal inheritance? So here you're just challenging the very idea that there is any kind of afterlife or any soul that exists inside of us as sort of independent and separate from our body, that duality you talk about. Then you write, as an aside, the romantic notion that physical parents beget spirit offspring seems irrational to me. Should not the parents' phenotype be reflected in their children? In other words, shouldn't their kids have bodies too?
If mom and dad have a corporeal body, the kids are going to have a corporeal body, not a spirit body. Yeah. But where,
well, I want to ask you now, hey, have you changed your mind on this? Because I think you have. And I thought it was interesting that you actually have a document in the form of a letter to a GA that has something that you believe in strongly, which you have changed your mind on 180 degrees over 10 years. And just can you tell the audience about that?
Yeah. At the time this letter was written, and in fact, for my entire academic and then professional career, my metaphysical leanings aligned with what's called reductive physicalism. So physicalism says that matter is primary and that consciousness is derivative, that consciousness is an emergent property. Okay. I no longer believe that matter is primary. And there's a growing number of theoretical physicists, neuroscientists, and philosophers who, like me, are coming to the belief that consciousness is primary, that consciousness is the ontological primitive, and that matter is derivative. Now, that's an entirely different and long discussion, so we won't go there. But suffice it to say, I do not believe that I am my body. There was a time when I did. I'll spare you the details, but I've had a couple of very personal experiences that have allowed me to understand that rather than my body experiencing consciousness, I now believe that consciousness is experiencing the body. And
Do you see this as a break? Do you see this as a break with your insistence on the scientific method, or a continuance of the same?
Oh, I think it is a continuance of the same. I'm employing information that would resonate with the science. Yeah.
I was going to say the believer here would go, you're doing nothing different than the thing you're criticizing that we're doing, which is that, emotional answers, spiritual answers are something outside of tangible, solid, hardcore evidence. And you're in the realm of what might be the less than most rational explanation. What would you say to that?
Okay, well, first of all, there are a number of credible neuroscientists working on a falsifiable proposal. Well, first of all, even those who insist that consciousness is emergent and that matter is primary, it's a problem known as the hard problem of consciousness, meaning they don't know how it is that the brain pulled it off, but somehow the brain does it. So we just need to figure out how the brain does it. But they're looking at this through the wrong end of the telescope. They've begun with a false assumption that matter is primary. Now, those of the listening audience familiar with Gödel's incompleteness theorem will know that there are some proposals that are so complex that even though the axioms support the proposal cannot be proven. In other words, when you come to a point where you've achieved the ontological primitive, that's the one thing that is given, that consciousness is primary. So if there was a proof for it, well, then we have to take a deeper dive into what that proof is. In other words, if there's evidence to support the claim that it's primary, then it couldn't be primary. You've got to take a closer look at the proofs. Consciousness is the ontological primitive. But again, let's go on to the next part, because that's going to take us for hours to get into all the details, and I'm not prepared to go into such depth.
Okay. Well, let's check the letter and see where we were with the letter, which I think we're coming to toward the end. You even go after the biblical Jesus in a letter to an apostle of Jesus. Is this your turn now, Bill? Is it?
Yep, I see it now. Okay, the biblical Jesus, even among New Testament scholars, such as fellows of the Jesus Seminar, the consensus is that only 18% of the sayings and 16% of the deeds attributed to Jesus in the Gospels were his. The remaining sayings and deeds are pure interpolation by persons or parties unknown, and although the majority of scholarly community believes in a historical Jesus, most readily admit that there is no historical evidence for his existence. None. In short, the biblical Jesus is largely a mythic hero archetype, and the probability that there ever was a historical Jesus is no better than 1 in 12,500.
Now, I have a question for you about this, and I had it when I read it the first time too, because this seems contradictory, and I hope you'll be able to explain it. You say that the majority of the scholarly community believes in a historical Jesus, but then you say the odds are only 1 in 12,500. What's up with that?
Now, that number came from the historian Richard Carrier using what's called Bayes' theorem. Bayes' theorem, well, it's a
probability. It's a probability.
Gary's out there. He's gonna love this.
And would you agree that Bayes' theorem, like any other theorem, is GIGO?
I'm not familiar with GIGO.
Garbage in, garbage out.
Oh. Well, the problem with Bayes' theorem, and this is why I wouldn't do the math. I wouldn't commit myself to it.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, how is it? Okay, first of all, it's the probability of A given B, B being the prior. Well, we're talking about mythic hero archetypes. So what kind of a value do you ascribe to a previous mythic hero archetype? And I'm just not smart enough to come up with a number that I think to be credible. Richard Carrier.
I don't think a mythic hero archetype precludes the idea that there was a real person.
No. No, there's first of all, let's say that there was a historical Jesus. It doesn't matter, because Christians, to include Mormons, they don't worship the historical Jesus. They worship the biblical Jesus. Now, most members of the LDS Church, I'm sure, would say, well, the biblical Jesus is the historical Jesus. And the evidence does not support that remark.
Right.
As
The fact that it's an itinerant zealot Jew rebelling against his religious society, but which did not say 86% of the things and did not do 88%, whatever it was, 88% of the things attributed, and certainly none of the miracles or supernatural events that occurred with him would be a Jesus that would be pointless to worship in the first place.
Yeah.
Yeah,
so
this is those Jesus seminar crackpots, those hippie cats back in the 60s.
So really, people on both sides will have heated arguments and debate about the historicity of Jesus. Fine, enjoy yourselves, knock yourself out, but it's irrelevant, because it's the biblical Jesus that warrants our full attention, and the evidence just does not support the fact that he said and did the things ascribed to him. Full stop.
The four Gospels and the epistles of Paul. Here's where you point out some things that I think are pretty much unsurprising. These would be like in Religion 101 in most schools other than BYU. None of the Gospels were written by the persons whose names such documents feature. They are all originally anonymous, yes. Secondly, these anonymous Greek writings are not eyewitness accounts, but were instead written 4 to 7 decades after such time as Jesus is said to have lived. And as to the writings of Paul, only 7 of his 13 epistles are believed to be genuine. The remaining 6 were written pseudonymously and are therefore fraudulent. Why did you include that in a letter to Elder Renlund?
As a basis for questioning the reliability of canon. Just because something can be cited from the scripture, it's the argument from authority fallacy. Just because you can cite or support your argument with a scriptural citation, that alone does not mean that your argument is therefore valid if in fact what you're citing is itself spurious.
Yeah. And even if it's not, someone once said that the devil cites scripture to suit his purpose.
Exactly.
Hey, Bill, you got that? Here's a short one for you.
All right. I love it. Racism. At last, the LDS Church has acknowledged its unjustified racist past, that denying blacks the priesthood has no basis in scripture. Equally troubling. What is a silent God if not complicit? Yeah. Mormons want you to believe, prophets, seers, and revelators in the LDS Church want you to believe that they can see around corners, that they teach the truth, that they are led by revelation. And meanwhile, from 1852 to 1978, and then even past that, and understanding why it happened in the first place, they seem to be completely on such an important issue. When so many smaller ones have happened where they're like, nope, God told us that. Don't drink coffee. God told us that. But on something so important as marginalizing people of color, God is nowhere to be found, and yet we're supposed to believe God talks to them on the other things.
Yeah.
Okay.
You hit right at the heart of it. I mean, I thought your questions were great. I thought these are just a great set of ways to get right at the heart of this belief system is absurd.
And here he is at the bottom, page 4. So there's a little bit more left, than more than 4 pages. You say, this I will concede. Do you want to read this, Dr. Clark? This is...
No, go ahead.
This I will concede. The fact that I'm not aware of confuting evidence to criticisms found above is no proof that such evidence does not exist. Just because I don't know about it doesn't mean it's not out there. Moreover, I fully agree that your inability to prove me wrong does not prove me right. I could be wrong, even very wrong. That's why I'm writing. But to prove me wrong requires hard evidence, not opinion or the color of rhetorical flourishes like testimony meeting. I added that part. As rational minds must agree, we cannot ignore the evidence and insist that we've prevailed. That's pretty well put. I'd included this little quote from Adam Smith. The learned ignore the evidence of their senses to preserve the coherence of the ideas of their imagination.
Yeah.
I've seen that a few times recently.
Brilliant.
Yeah, this stuff's been going on a long time, hasn't it?
Oh, boy.
We like to think we're an advanced species. I think we can do things quicker, and that's about it. So did you want to read this, Bill or Dr. Clark?
Yeah. Bill, go for it.
Excellent. As the Salt Lake Tribune recently reported in his conference address, President Monson admonished Latter-day Saints burdened with doubt to have faith. But do not Catholic or Muslim leaders entreat their members to do the same without a shred of evidence to support the conviction that Peter was their first pope or that the Eucharist is the literal flesh and blood of Christ? How are devout Catholics to reconcile their doubts? Very simple. They are admonished to ignore the critics, suspend their doubt, and accept such basic tenets on faith. How do Muslims know that the angel Gabriel is the source of Muhammad's teachings? Same answer. Therefore, in light of the judicious and deliberate reasoning, I must insist. Faith is no substitute for evidence. It is certainly not a virtue. If anything, faith is a blinding vice that abets intellectual laziness and tolerates even the absurd, the illogical, and the outrageous. How ironic that what we are asked to believe and accept on faith so often becomes a knowledge-limiting factor.
Very, very interesting. Well put. So faith, you say, is not a virtue.
Not blind faith when it comes to weighty decisions and matters of, in this regard, supreme importance when it comes to your hopes for the eternity, shall we say.
Which must be blind. Isn't any hope in the future blind by its very nature?
Well, you're right. You're right. We
can't see the future. That's what I mean. It is hidden from us. It must be blind.
Yeah. So no, if okay, maybe I'm being obstreperous, but if someone asks me to do something, I don't think I'm being unreasonable if I want to understand the basis for the injunction. Why is it you want me to do A, B, and C? Help me understand. And once I understand, you're more likely to secure my cooperation. Yeah, that's my nature. Now, others much prefer, tell me what to do and I'll do it. Well, I'm sorry, but I'm just not comfortable with that proposal.
Yeah, you're one of those better to reign in hell than serve in heaven kind of guys, aren't you?
Probably, yeah. I'm not impressed by those who take comfort in sitting on plush red velvet thrones made available only to members of priesthood privilege. I mean, honestly, sitting on such a throne of priesthood privilege no more makes you a prophet than sitting in the garage makes you a car.
Nice. They even have a song about it. It's called They Sit on Red Velvet.
Don't give up your day job.
I already did.
Oh, that's right.
Too late. Thanks, Doc. I don't get to retire like you. I didn't get to work on GA's.
I'll tell you what. If I had known 40 years ago how wonderful retirement is, I would have retired then.
I'll bet you would have. I bet you would have. She's got Elder Renlund eyes. That was a big song back in the 80s. Okay. So were we done with this? With this slide?
Let's go to the next. Yeah, let's keep going.
We're to the signature line. Why don't you read this one? Fearing that I've overstayed my welcome.
Okay. Fearing that I've overstayed my welcome, I'll leave it there. I do not know that your demanding schedule will allow you to respond, but I'm hopeful that you will, if only to acknowledge that you received my letter. Nothing would please me more than a flight to Utah, where we may discuss these and related subjects privately and in greater detail. Likewise, if your responsibilities ever take you to Portland, my wife Cindy and I would be pleased to host you at our second home on the Oregon coast. I do not want our differences to become a friendship limiting barrier. I remain sincerely yours.
Yeah. 5 years ago and not a word since. I guess he, like Khan, has decided to let you eat static.
Crickets. Nothing but crickets from his end.
Oh,
Yeah.
well,
But
that's
I'm not-
disappointing, I think.
Well, it is. It's terribly disappointing, but I understand. I probably would have done the same, because I don't know how you could possibly justify, especially Smith's libidinous behaviors. Come on, there's no excuse.
Yeah. Any thoughts from you, Bill?
I'll just say the CES letter, and there are moments where you're very adamant about your position, to where if I was Elder Renlund, I would be very apprehensive about responding, not only because there is no way to respond and address the questions in a way that is going to solve the problems. That it's the reason, no offense, Jackson, but it's the reason that Jackson doesn't answer the questions on the conversation with us. It's the reason that, again, no offense, Jim Bennett, that Jim Bennett sort of steps away from the questions at times. It's the reason that Fair wants to always sort of shift from one thing to the next.
You didn't say no offense to Fair, though.
No offense. Yeah, sure. So my point being is that your letter to him was very adamant about points that he was going to have very extreme difficulty refuting, no real possibility of doing so. I could see why he might be apprehensive. But the CES letter comes across in a way that I think is very standoffish. I thought in a very quick way, you got right to the heart of the matter, laid out problems that can't be solved, and did so in a way that I think was respectful to him and to your relationship with him. And I'm saddened that he never responded to you.
Yeah.
I hope he doesn't need any help with his eyes.
Well, my licenses have expired. So,
well, he'd have to come begging you hat in hand for any help from you at this point, I expect, huh? Because that's the Hippocratic oath, I understand.
Well, gentlemen, it's been a delight.
Well, you're not done yet, pal. The witness will
Okay.
get back on the stand because we've got cross-examination coming up by way of some phone calls.
Well, yeah,
Okay.
we hope that people will come into the studio. I'll put the
Yeah,
banner.
not the phone calls. Not the phone calls. I said phone calls. I meant coming into the studio.
There's no phone line open. But if you do want, so I should take that banner down because that's not going to be it. But in the live comments and also in the YouTube description down below the video, you'll see that there is a link. If you do want to come in and talk to Dr. Clark, that would be a great way to ask him a question or to share your thoughts about tonight's episode. While people are doing that, hopefully some folks will jump in. I'll just note, some guy out there asked, RFM and Bill, feel free to go into detail on his specific reasons on why he left. I didn't understand some of it in the Book of Mormon or the Bible. What was sort of the moment you go from being an active Latter-day Saint to not going anymore, not believing anymore? What was really sort of the issue at the moment that prompted that?
There wasn't a singular event or a particular point of doctrine. The changes in the Book of Mormon were of concern to me. For example, I believe in the first edition of the Book of Mormon, God himself came down. He didn't send his son. And yet Mary was later made to give birth to the Son of God. And yet that still disagrees with, correct me if I'm wrong, is it in Mosiah 15?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Where Abinadi?
He has the old teaching. That God
Okay,
himself
exactly.
shall come down among the children of men and do all these
Yeah.
wonderful things and then get crucified.
Okay, that harmonizes with, let's get back to my time I spent with Hugh Nibley. one of the books that he recommended I study, and I did in detail, was the coffin texts and the, let's see, there's the Book of the Dead, the coffin text, and the pyramid texts. And there is one hell of a lot of overlap between the Mary-Jesus relationship with Isis-Horus relationship. And I mean, where Horus is considered the beloved son of Osiris. It's basically, if you read it without any knowledge of the story of Jesus, you could see, oh my God, the Christians were stealing from the religion of ancient Egypt. So there were a number of those issues that seemed to me to be plagiarism, maybe too strong, but they were just reinventing the wheel.
Did you talk about this with Hugh Nib? I was wondering if you talked about this with Hugh Nibley, because I don't think that's why he gave you that homework to study.
No. He, what got me in his favor was I had picked up on the course of the Lord is one eternal round, his reference to recurrent mortalities, because he had alluded to it in some of his writings without coming out and saying it. And when I called him on that, his response was, well, Brother Clark, if you can see it, they should be able to see it. I shouldn't have to come out and say it, in other words, but why don't you come on down and we'll continue this discussion.
That's a nice way of saying I'm not allowed to say it because I live in a religious dictatorship.
Yeah, well, exactly. So a deep dive into Christianity, where I saw a long list of mythic hero archetypes. Mm-hmm. I can't think of them all off the top of my head, but I mean, there's many of them. Okay, I'm not going to try to remember them all because I won't. My memory's not as good as it used to be, but there's a long list of dying and rising God motifs. And a lot of what's called euhemerization, where you take a fictional character and introduce him into a legitimate historical setting. And having done so, it's easy then to believe that your mythical character must be historical simply because it appears to collaborate with those environmental conditions.
It's like Forrest Gump.
Okay.
That's the whole movie,
so
right?
I'm sorry?
That's the whole movie, taking a fictional character and putting him in all these historical situations.
Okay. So, so you can, if you conquer a neighboring country and you want to win them over, well, the way to do it is through their gods. Wow. So you take their God, take your God, and you combine the two. It's called syncretism. And by combining the two, they're more likely to offer you less resistance with this new arrangement than had you instructed them to abandon their God and embrace your God. Mm-hmm. No, you simply marry the two. And there's a lot of history around that. The problems with the Book of Mormon, the absence of archaeological evidence. Come on, you've got these wars involving millions of people. Well, fine. Where are all these steel mills that would have been required to manufacture all these weapons of war?
I think they bought foreign.
That was before the trade wars?
Yes, no wars indeed. Everything was nice and everybody was just trading. Oh my God. Yeah, there's so much that's a problem. Guess what? I've got good news and bad news for you, Dr. Clark. The good news is that you don't have to answer any questions. The bad news is nobody's calling to ask you any questions.
Well, that's wonderful.
Oh my gosh, not even one? I guess we did have one, at least that got put up on the screen by Bill from that some guy out there asking that specific question about what it was that finally clued you into the fact that maybe this wasn't the church for you.
Can I do this? This is,
yeah.
can you see this?
You mean you're plugging your book? Sure, go ahead.
Well, no, what I'm saying is there's the answer to the question.
Ah,
Okay,
now that's
so
a
for
book.
people,
You wrote it, right? And it's called
yes,
Escaping the
Escaping
Darkness of Religious
of,
Light,
of
Volume 1.
religious light. Now, there's not going to be a volume 2, even though I've got enough material for it. Frankly, I'm just bored to death on the subject. I'm more interested in other things. But yeah, Escaping the Darkness of Religious Light, it's over 400 pages, over 1,400 footnotes. It took me 10 years to write it. There's the answers that explain why it is I chose the direction that I chose.
How would you describe the direction you chose?
It returned me, it's brought me back to a deeper dive into physics, into, right now I'm studying molecular biology and biochemistry, wanting to better understand the nanomachinery of the eukaryotic cells. I think there's compelling evidence for consciousness as the primitive, not an anthropomorphic heavenly father. Because if God is in fact a compositional being, then you have to account for the composition of the composite being. Well, that takes you to a process of infinite regress. So whatever is the ontological primitive has to be unalloyed. It cannot be an amalgamation of parts. It simply has to be the primitive. What's primary? The one given. And the only way you're going to discover that is through the process of semantics, not through syntax or through symbols. Because again, let's say as we're having a discussion, what are you doing as I'm speaking? You're trying to understand what it is Kim is saying, and you're assigning it a value and an interpretation. It's the telephone game, isn't it? You're going to get lost in that fog of information. In other words, the solution is you have to have the experience yourself. Recall Thomas Aquinas's experience. Recall he was the one that wrote the Summa Theologica, a masterpiece, his magnum opus. He's writing this beautiful text of religious canon. He's on his way to Mass and he has an epiphany, so sacred that he won't talk about it. But he realizes that everything he had committed to paper had the value of straw. He refused to write another word and said that, no, I'm not going to go any farther. After seeing the things that I have seen, I'm not going to invest any more time and effort into recording it, because syntax or symbols does not do justice to the experience itself. In quantum mechanics, it's known as the no cloning theorem. Okay,
It sounds like you're
ahead.
promoting a mystical experience on an individual level as the sine qua non of science.
Very good. Very good. I think that employing the scientific method. I mean, recall the journey of Buddha. He went from one teacher to the next, to the next, to the next, until he realized, I've milked as much out of that resource as I possibly can. The rest is on my own. He has his epiphany. It doesn't matter if anyone believes him or not. He knows what he experienced.
Doesn't it matter if it's going to be tested according to the scientific method? Haven't we escaped?
That's if you're hoping to convince others, or to demonstrate for their satisfaction, or that you're looking to justify your position. And quite frankly, I require no such validation.
Okay,
I
well,
think
hang on a
it's
second here, because isn't that exactly what you criticized here in your letter? This theoretical idea of Peter Higgs announcing that he had discovered the Higgs boson principle, but it was just a matter of faith and you had to accept it on his say so. He wasn't going to demonstrate it to you in any kind of scientific way.
okay. So I'm not clear on what it is you're challenging. What I'm saying
Well,
here is
I'm
that,
trying to find out, because it sounds like what you're promoting now, what your scientific researches have led you to, is to a very non-scientific idea of having an individual mystical experience that cannot be replicated or subject to scientific falsifiability or experimentation. Now, am I understanding it correctly? First off,
no, you're right. You're right. So just let me summarize what let me summarize what it is I think I understood you to say.
Yeah.
It wasn't enough for Peter Higgs and his colleagues. There were two others. Actually, there was more than that. There was a group of them. It wasn't enough that they were able to advance the elegant mathematics to tell you, if you do the following, you're going to find the Higgs boson. No, that's wonderful theory. That's it's theoretical physics, but it has to be made. That information must be made available to the experimentalists. Okay, and that's why, for example, as an aside, string theory has not caught on and is incrementally being dismissed as the hope that would marry general relativity with quantum mechanics, because those two are irreconcilable. So they continue to look for what's called the theory of everything, or the grand unification theory. Okay, but that's as it pertains to the Higgs boson. So as it turned out, they were able to test the theory and confirm the existence of a Higgs boson by virtue of what that particle decayed into. Because the Higgs boson only lasted for about 10 to the minus 21 seconds.
But it was there.
Anyway, yes, yeah.
And it can be replicated.
They employed the scientific method. But there's, again, it's like I've tried to say, possibly not to your satisfaction. At some level, you come to a point where you can no longer prove what it is that you're hoping others to accept. But that's not the burden. Once you've had the experience, it doesn't matter if others do not believe you. And I could cite a number of examples of individuals I've communicated with. One in particular, a guy named Christoph Koch, who favored me with a cover blurb on my book. He had a mystical experience, and this guy was a hardcore physicalist. But after his experience, he realized, I've been wrong. Matter is not primary. Consciousness is primary.
Okay, I think I understand what you're saying, but you would agree with me then that this experience that you have had, and that you're talking about this other individual having had, this experience with a capital T, a capital E, kind of quotation marks, a little bit glowing, kind of neon. This experience is outside the scientific method. It's outside science.
At some point in time, you're not going to be able to prove it. Just like with Gödel's incompleteness theorem.
So why do you go there? Why does a man who's so committed to science as you go to something that's outside science as proof of anything?
Because I've identified the limits of the scientific method. But let me clarify. There are things that scientists will be able to propose, theories that are falsifiable, that will bring us that much closer to understanding what is primary. Yeah, believe me, I know of individuals who are working on that as we speak. Yes.
So we've got no calls, but give me another 5 minutes if you would, okay, of your time. You've already been very generous, and I appreciate so much your coming on the show tonight. But so when the heck did you have this experience?
There's a few of them, and I'm not prepared to discuss them.
Can you tell us when you had the first one?
Days after my wife, Cindy, passed.
Okay. Were you expecting it?
No.
Were you doing
No.
anything to prepare for having it happen?
No.
I guess not if you weren't expecting it.
No. And then there's a number, if you've ever studied the writings of Jung, he introduced something called meaningful coincidences, also known as syncretism. And there was one event that woke me up at 2:30 in the morning, days after Cindy passed, and other events that started happening weeks after she passed, meaningful coincidences that introduced me to physicists, neuroscientists, and philosophers who had information that I would find to be of interest to me and that would facilitate my journey.
Have any of them written on the subject?
Oh, yes. Yeah. Oh, yes. Yeah.
Can you give us a couple of names and publications if you know them?
Some names that commanded my attention and respect. Federico Fagin, he wrote a book called Irreducible. He had an incredible mystical experience. In fact, he was the inventor of the processor, the microprocessor. His book, Irreducible. So that's Federico Fagin, Faggin. Probably my favorite philosopher, who has 2 PhDs, one in computer engineering. He was at the LHC at CERN in his capacity as a computer scientist, a guy named Bernardo Kastrup, Kastrup. He's written voluminously. His second PhD is in philosophy, specializing in the philosophy of mind. Another one is Donald Hoffman, Hoffman. And again, Christoph Koch, that's Koch. His book was, he's written a few, but the most recent book, I think it's entitled, Then I Am Myself the World. I could have gotten part of that title wrong.
It would be understandable.
He shares some of the details of his mystical experience in the book. And again, this guy was, yeah.
What the hell's going on with all you scientists having these mystical experiences? I mean, you must have been surprised, not only that you had one, okay, but that all these other guys who are scientists, and I'm not just saying men, but whatever, that they're having all these mystical experiences. What's going on?
Well, I would say that there's only a small minority having mystical experiences. Some of the theoretical physicists at Princeton, for example, are coming to the awareness that space-time reality, which we once thought as fundamental, space-time reality is itself not fundamental. It's a broken hypothesis. There are realities outside of space-time, cosmological polytopes, they're called. I won't get into it because, again, I'm not a theoretical physicist and I don't know enough math. Go ahead, Bill.
I'll just say, I brought it up here with you in Conversations on Mormonism Live. I'm very familiar with Donald Hoffman. I've had Mormon discussion episodes talking to people who have had tons of experience looking at his work. I don't know the other names you've mentioned, but there are folks who are in the field of quantum mechanics and other places where, to what you're saying, that we've all been raised with this idea that time and space is fundamental to the universe. And some of these scientists, by way of science, because the experiments demonstrate in the data, I'll say perhaps, but they would say stronger than that, that time and space isn't fundamental, and that what some of these experiments indicate is that consciousness is what is fundamental to the universe, that it came first, it came before time and space. And that would be a groundbreaking thought that would cause all of us to rewrite how we think about things.
Isn't that God?
Okay, you're right. And
The
Bill,
consciousness
here's
that
the
exists
trend.
before time and space. Isn't that God?
Okay,
It's
not an anthropomorphic God.
No, but that
I didn't say that.
No, but that the creative energy of the universe, this is all an illusion.
Yes.
The best way I can explain it, Donald Hoffman says that if you can think of your eyes as being a VR headset, and we all go like, no, I see the world as it is. Well, that's baloney, because we know that, for instance, dogs see things we don't, and they don't see things that we do. So, and a tree is a living thing. It perceives the universe a certain way. Mushrooms send signals underground through mycelium to the trees, and the trees, when there's a fire, get messages from the mushrooms that say to change the direction of their leaves to be more resistant to the heat of a fire in the middle of the forest. And
The mushrooms don't just say run.
so we all have, because the tree can run. We all have an idea that what we see is reality, and we're like every other species on the planet, where our perception has been catered to our own form of evolution, and clearly we don't pick up on everything, and clearly we're missing things that other species of life see and feel. Energies. By the way, here's another little thing. There's been a study done. There's no ifs, ands, or buts here. They can show that if you're facing this direction and there's somebody behind you, and that person looks at you or doesn't look at you, in a statistically significant way, you'll know to some degree more accurately that they're looking at you when they're looking at you, and no, they're not looking at you when they're not. So there's some sixth sense that isn't your eyes and isn't, the universe isn't what we think it is exactly. Now, yes, it's not a bearded man in the sky who created Adam and Eve and placed them in the garden, because that's absurd.
Okay, Bill, let me give you a name for what you just.
Let me say one more thing, which is, what if, and again, I don't know that I believe this. I love talking about it though. What if all of this is the universe entertaining itself? Because it would have been boring with no time and no space to go forever. That would have just been empty.
So the universe is using us to masturbate, basically.
In Hinduism, I forget what the name of the god is, but essentially he's dreaming all of this. I'll stop there. I don't believe it, but there's enough data there that I don't disbelieve it, and I'm willing to engage a conversation with people who have delved into these arenas, and I find them deeply interesting, and they make for great conversations sitting at a bar over a drink, or at a house at a party, having a conversation with a group of people. And this isn't all just hocus pocus either.
No, there's a name for what you were describing. It's called naive realism. We would like to think, because we have the greatest amount of intellect of all the species in the animal kingdom, that our view of reality is somehow expected to be the most reliable and accurate. But the trouble is, we have only 5 senses. What would the world look like? What would be our phenomenal reality if we had 10 senses, 20 senses?
Yeah.
Looking at the same environment, it would not be the same experience. So all we know, in fact, not to go off on this one, you ask an honest physicist, what is matter? We don't know what matter is. Now, when I was studying physics, they introduced me to matter using the Rutherford model of the atom. Okay, it was useful fiction, but it's a good way of introducing these inchoate minds to angular momentum, spin, electric charge, et cetera, until you find out that no, there are no particles. All there is are fields. A particle is simply an excitation in the field. It's a description of the field in action. It's a doing of the field. It's not a discrete little speck of hardness.
Let me stop you for just a second and just say to the audience, because there's so many people in our audience, RFM, probably you included, who are just going, it's just easier to be an atheist and just assume that this is all just crazy talk.
I feel like the show has completely gotten away from me.
I know you say that every time we go down this road. I'll note one more time the part, what he just said, the particles that he's made up of in the air between him and then the wall next to him. When you get it down to its lowest grade, it's not solids. It's all the same material. And actually it's even more than that. Those particles are coming over and intermixing with him, and his particles are over there intermixing with it. And that's just science. When we get things down to the lowest grade of what things are made of, it's all the same stuff. And somehow we perceive it as him and you and me and the wall and the air and the water. And that's just not real.
Bill, okay, what we see, let me sum up with this, because we're running out of time, and we don't have time to go, and we don't have the time to go into the depth the subject requires.
Yeah.
But I refer you to David Bohm and his discussion of what's called the implicate order and the explicate order. The explicate order is what you see when you look out the window. Information that avails itself to sensory perception. What you do not, and that's the explicate, what you do not see is the means by which the explicate even became possible. It would be like looking at your desktop monitor. What you see are images and icons. Mm-hmm. That's the explicate. What you do not see are the electronics that make possible the image on the screen. So if I see on my screen a picture of a tree, where the hell inside of my computer am I to find a tree? No, I just find circuitry. But it's because of the circuitry.
It's the circuitry.
It's because of the electronics that the image is possible. So I saw a comment by Dan Vogel on entanglement. Yeah, that's part of the explicate. It's a mirage, because on the implicate order, there is no separation. So it's like
this is important, not important to this conversation, but it's important to your idea, which is if we only saw things as they were, if we didn't have the VR headset of our eyes that took the material that is you, me, the wall, the water, which is all the same, and it didn't categorize it and do so in a way that was entertaining enough that we were like, whoa, here comes a car. Whoa, there's this. We would struggle to survive. We would struggle to make out things. We've been trained to interpret the data that's there so as to make sense of it in a way that is productive to survival.
Yes.
And again, this is millions, if not billions of years of development of evolution of technology, technology meaning our eyes and our brain and the neural paths and all the others. This looking at things and being amused by the world around us because the data is being interpreted as a computer screen and as a table and as a drink of coffee. It's so useful. It's so useful that that's the way the evolutionary path took us. It was what survives and what dies, and whatever was productive for survival develops, grows, progresses, and keeps on going. And whatever isn't, those ones died off. Okay. Anyway, I've said enough.
Yeah. No, but that's very good. I appreciate your contribution.
You're very welcome.
Yeah.
All I know is that when I walk into a wall, it hurts.
Yeah.
That's all I know.
Your brain told you that's a wall because those particles mean something different than the particles next to it.
I can't, it's not like, what is that? What's that platform? Was it something in 3/4 in Harry Potter? I don't care how effing hard I run into a wall. I'm not going to go through it.
No.
And by the way, if I am blindfolded and I don't know the wall is there and I walk into it, I will hurt myself.
Well,
but science says it's not a solid. It's no more a solid than the air between you and the wall.
No, but
my body says differently.
Okay, there's what's called the poly exclusion principle that will explain why you can't walk through walls. But that's another discussion.
Yes.
But back to Donald Hoffman. He reminded us, yes, take very seriously what you see, but don't take it literally.
Yeah.
That's why nobody liked Donald.
Let's end it on that note so we don't go further into this, because the audience that doesn't believe this is never going to believe it, and the audience that believes it has already been thinking about these things. So,
And there was this great letter, by the way, a while back that got written by our guest, Dr. Clark, to an apostle of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, Elder Renlund. That was an awesome letter. That was a great letter that you wrote, Dr. Clark. Thank you for sharing it with us. What?
He's so smart. He knows so many words that he uses in common parlance that isn't common parlance that we never use. It reminds me of an old saying that when followers fail to incorporate fundamental precepts into built form, they're likely to perpetuate previous manifestations. So I think you're a bright cookie.
What was that?
If you do the thing that others have done without learning from their mistakes, you're likely to repeat the mistakes that have been made before you.
In other words,
I understood that. Why didn't I understand the first thing you said?
Because it's said in such smart language, like all the words that he uses.
Okay, that's why I didn't understand it. Because you're talking smart.
There's actually a word to describe what Bill just did. It's called a sesquipedalian rant.
What he said.
Bill's not that old, actually.
Anyway,
he's kind of young.
Well, gentlemen, thank you. I've enjoyed the discussion.
Of a quadrupedarian. Anyway, thank you so much, Brother Clark. Thank you, Mr. Reel. Thank you, Elder Renlund, for watching, and I hope you've learned something. I think the most exciting thing about this whole thing is that you can change your mind about something.
You can.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean? Yeah. In 10 years, can I ask how old you are?
71.
So you wrote this letter when you were 61.
And yeah, but there's still so much to learn. So much to learn.
Well, you better get on it.
Oh, I'm trying. You know, one of the advantages in being a widower is that I've got my time to spend the way I want to. And so I'm still, like I said, right now I'm studying molecular biology and biochemistry.
Well, that's what I plan on doing when I'm 71.
Very good.
I've been saving it my whole life till I become 71 to get into that stuff, molecular biology. Very interesting. You're a very intelligent man. It's been great having you on the show. Thank you so much, Dr. Clark. Thank you, Bill, for holding down the fort in the live chat. Thanks, everybody, for watching. Please join us on Friday at 8 o'clock p.m. Mountain Time for another exciting episode of Mormonism After Dark. We offended 2 people grievously last week. We'll see if we can get 3 people wounded grievously this Friday. What do you say, Bill?
Roll up your sleeves.
The only thing I want to say is you not only can change your mind, from time to time you should.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, it shows that you're growing.
Yeah.
Okay.
But let's offend a few more people, because challenging ideas should challenge us.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Whatever you said.
All right.
Thanks again, everybody. Please join us Friday. It's been a lot of fun. Until then, wishing you good night from Mormonism Live.